Can't roll these.
Oh, that's there for the garbage. Oh, okay, sorry. No, don't be sorry.
Thank you. Our first question
all right.
of the evening.
Why would you?
Kind of an easy one. You have 1 minute to answer. What is the role of the property appraiser, and what special skills or knowledge is required of the office? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the end with Mr. Wilkinson, and each of you will have one chance to answer a question first. There are 3 questions.
Getting better. The more I do it, the better I get.
Statewide, under state constitution, state laws, and regulations, the property appraiser in all 67 counties is responsible every year to reassess all repairs sellers create in the prior 12 months. More is still working. The sales that are being transpired now.
Hello, candidates forum brought to you by the Cape Coral Chamber of Commerce. Our next race of the evening is Lee County Sheriff. At this time, I would like to call candidates Sheriff Mike Scott and Christian Meister to come forward and take their seats. Again, a reminder that the lady controlling the red light district tonight remains Gloria Tate. Always concerns me when somebody brings a briefcase to the stage. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Mike Scott.
You have only one microphone?
There's one that's a couple seats over for you. We'll let you have your own.
Christian
tonight.
Meister, candidate for Sheriff of Lee County.
All right, well, gentlemen, we'll start with our first 3 questions. First question, 1 police officer was killed this year. Officers in the Cape have been shot at and beaten. Is there anything you can do as sheriff to decrease the risk officers or deputies face every day on the streets? Sheriff Scott?
Certainly regrettable anytime there's loss of life, whether it's law enforcement or otherwise, and the Widman tragedy hit home for all of us. As you'll recall, the Sheriff's Office took over the city of Fort Myers for a couple of days following that so that every police officer and every member of that agency could participate in the grieving process. But in direct response to the question, training remains one of the critical key components, staffing levels so that we're not understaffed, so that backup is appropriate, watching the shift work and off-duty work so that we don't have fatigued officers. There are 10 top killers in the field of law enforcement, and training, fatigue, things of that nature typically contribute to those tragedies. So we maintain a high level of awareness and sensitivity to that, and stay alert, stay alive is my motto.
We currently have a morale breakdown at the Lee County Sheriff's Office, and that is we have too many supervisors and not enough actual officers who are patrolling the streets. Okay, we need to take care of the officers, we need to do more, okay, and then we can curtail some of these issues. Also, we have too many children who are unattended in the streets, and that is a problem in Lee County. What we need to do, we need to engage in proactive law enforcement and give the children the life skills they need so they can stay out of jail. Thank you.
Christian, you can answer this next question first. For the first time, sheriff's deputies will not receive raises this next fiscal year due to budget cuts at the state level. Where do you see the agency's operations with regard to personnel in the next 4 years?
The officers are working very hard and they're putting their lives on the line every day. I believe that the officers are entitled to a raise that is tied at least to the consumer price index. And we need to do much more to make sure that they are compensated accordingly for the risk they're taking every day. The money they are making right now at the sheriff's office is, in my opinion, not enough.
While the salaries are comparable, and I'll take exception with that, with all of our neighboring law enforcement agencies, certainly I also agree that the men and women work hard and deserve a pay raise consistent with at least cost of living and perhaps some merit. However, we are facing unprecedented economic challenges. Having successfully negotiated 4 consecutive budgets with our good board of county commissioners, I know a little something about what's going on here. And the reality of it is that for the last 3 years straight, The state law enforcement agencies, the Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Wildlife Commission, for 3 years consecutively have received no pay raises. So while we will work diligently and move forward in the future, hopefully with an economic upturn, we understood the tax implications of Amendment 1, the revenue funding cuts of Amendment 1, and other drawbacks from the economic downturn, and we had to tighten our belts very tightly. The men and women understood that, and morale remains high at your Lee County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Sheriff Scott, you can answer this next question first. The Sheriff's Office has created several new units in the past few years, including, among others, a child abuse unit and a prescription fraud unit. At a time when government budgets are being cut, which operations would you trim or expand in the next 4 years?
Well, those two that you mentioned are mission critical. I mean, there could be nothing more sacred than the safety and welfare of a child. And I think all of us in the community saw enough at the state level with the unprecedented shortfalls that DCF was up against and lives that were slipping through the cracks. So, in a proactive approach, your sheriff's office, together under my leadership, moved forward quickly to make a child abuse unit that will curtail, hopefully, some of that unnecessary death and injury. As far as prescription drug medications, last year in the state of Florida, 50% of the overdose deaths were at the hands of prescription medications. And so clearly, when you have numbers like that driving these types of deaths and destruction in our community, we have to take action. We will cut only non-mission critical if we have to cut. Parades, show and tells at the schools. I spent time at a school today, in fact, visiting with some 5th graders over here at Cape Charter. Things like that are not mission critical, and we'll have to be very mindful as we move forward with some of those.
Regarding the mission critical here, I think one of the things we need to do is reduce the high turnover rates at the sheriff's office that is caused by favoritism within the department. Maybe I believe that will free up some money, okay? But regarding the children, I have a background in child protection, and my job was to provide services for the abandoned, abused, and neglected children. Now, of course, I have other experiences too. But regarding the kids, okay, what we need to do, when I become sheriff, I will take a look at these programs. And just because these programs are handed to us doesn't mean that they actually work for us, okay? So I will take a look at that.
Now you have the opportunity to ask each other a question. You'll have 1 minute to respond to that question, then the person who asked the question can have a 30-second rebuttal. Sheriff Scott, you have a question for your opponent.
Sure. Christian, I've been a state-certified practicing law enforcement officer here for 22 years. Been the first officer to respond on everything from barking dogs to murder, suicides, and everything in between. I've patrolled every inch of this community on every shift. How long have you been a law enforcement officer? What's your total experience level?
That's a very good question. Mr. Scott here is a police officer, but the voters are not hiring, they're not voting to be a police officer in their office. We're looking for an administrator. Administrator's job is to hire, to fire, to delegate, to evaluate, and confiscate. Okay? And so, what experiences do I have? I was waiting for the call. I'm a veteran of Operation Desert Storm, and I was in Galveston, Texas, and I was a drug interdiction support staff in the Caribbean Sea. I was waiting for the call, okay? And I'm the only candidate for sheriff who is a veteran of the military. Thank you.
Christian, Mike, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, I do. While you were waiting for the call, I was answering the call. And let me make it very clear, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one candidate on stage tonight for sheriff that has ever been a police officer in their entire life. And that's me, and I'm proud to continue as your sheriff.
I have several experiences that relate to the law enforcement work. I have experience in police liability law, experience in civil rights law. I also have Florida State Officer certification. That means I understand the officer mentality, okay? And again, I was in the United States military. I also have a degree in communications, okay? Means I can talk to you, okay? And that's what it's about. That's what the sheriff needs to do, ladies and gentlemen. He needs to work for the taxpayers and not for the deputies. The deputies, they're already getting a paycheck, okay? As a sheriff, I will work for the people and not for the deputies, okay? The deputies now, of course, we need to make sure they're safe and all that. And
Christian, do you have a question for Sheriff Scott?
Yes, I'd like to know why why the sheriff's office employs a law enforcement officer who was convicted in battery. As far as I understand, when I try to get a job as a police officer, you cannot have a battery conviction. And I'd like to know, because when I see a law enforcement agency as a sheriff, I will set the standards, okay? And those do not include people who beat a woman up to the point where she has a black and blue eyes, okay? So answer this one, would you, sir?
The answer is we do not employ someone with the traits and characteristics or the prior record that you just mentioned.
Okay, this person is Mr. Richard Snyder, who went to the academy with me, and I personally saw the photo, and you can go on the Lee County website. So, but I know this sheriff here is spreading a lot of lies about me. That would not be the first time.
All right, now we have, I'm going to wear your arms out here a little bit. We have 10 yes or no questions for you all. If you'll grab your paddles. They both say yes. They both say no. All right, we're good. All right. All right, first question. Do you believe the sheriff's office has too many senior managers? Number 2, should promoting and recruiting minorities in the sheriff's office be a priority? Number 3, should a sheriff represent his office in full uniform and support a national political candidate at a rally? Has the sheriff's office done enough to stop the dramatic rise in grow houses over the last 2 years? Number 5, does training among deputies need to improve to help drop any increase in the crime rate? Are Cape Coral taxpayers receiving the services they pay for?
I cannot speak to this. When I become sheriff, I will check into this. This question would not be necessarily fair to me as a non-sheriff at this time, so I ask for that exception. Okay, thank you.
Number 7, are early retirement options a realistic way to save money in the sheriff's department?
Again, it can be. I have to look at the figures, okay, and we have a budget director, and we pick their brains.
This particular segment isn't going to require a verbal response. It's just going to be yes or no, okay? Number 8, would you be willing to slash the 2010 sheriff's budget even more and possibly risk losing deputies should the economy continue to slide? Number 9, should the sheriff's office foot the entire bill for school resource officers? Number 10, do you feel safe enough where you live to leave your door unlocked at night?
Not with the current sheriff being sheriff.
Gentlemen, we want to thank you for your time tonight. You will be brought back up to the stage momentarily for a question and answer period with the audience and for closing statements, but thank you again for your time. Now we move to U.S. House of Representatives, 14th Congressional District. Would those candidates please come to the stage? I guess 2 of you will need to share a microphone. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Bert Saunders, currently state senator from District 37, which includes Cape Coral.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Jeff George, and I'm running with no party affiliation.
Good evening. My name is Robert Neal. I'm the Democrat in this race, and I'm the hometown boy.
We'll start with our questions. A reminder, you'll have 1 minute to answer those questions. Gloria Tate remains our timekeeper. Will not leave until the lights go out tonight. First question, Senator Saunders, if you want to answer first. What role should government be playing in the current economic crisis?
Well, I supported the bailout that was adopted by Congress. I supported the first bailout, which unfortunately wasn't approved, and there was another $140 billion in pork added to the second bailout. I supported it because I consider this to be an investment by the American people in our own economy. I grew very concerned that our banking system was beginning to get to a point where they couldn't lend even to our good businesses that rely on credit for financing inventory, for financing their payroll. And if we didn't have the government step in and take some control, that we would see a deepening recession in this country and a longer-term recession. I'm absolutely convinced that if the government does this right, that taxpayers will benefit in two ways. Number one, that the recession, if there is one, will be less severe. It'll last for a shorter period of time, and the economy will kick in much more quickly. And secondly, that if it's done right, the toxic securities, if you will, that are to be acquired ultimately reflect people that are living in their homes, people that are going to want to keep that property, and ultimately that property will increase in value, and those homeowners will pay off those mortgages.
There's no question about it that we have to do something about the issue of the bank liquidity. However, I did not support the bailout in the form that was first presented or what passed. And the reason for that has to do with the fact that we need to make sure that there is a sufficient transparency and accountability in the system to make sure that the money that we're pumping into the banks doesn't go for their own personal use, or more likely, I should say, go to uses and purposes that don't benefit the overall community. The second issue, the real problem with the economy is here on Main Street. The problem is that we don't have good jobs. The problem is that healthcare is eating up too much of our budget. We need to make sure that pensions and Social Security are taken care of. We need to make sure that the wages are there for people to actually have enough money to spend on themselves. Because when you take care of the middle class, you will have a much stronger economy overall. And until we do that, we're going to be continually chasing our tails on this issue.
I think the federal government is directly responsible for the downturn in the economy and the problems that we're having in the financial sector. The deregulation of the financial industries led to a lust for money and greed unprecedented in the United States history. That, coupled with reduction of taxes and borrowing and spending, has thrown our economy into turmoil, which unfortunately I believe is way worse than they're telling us. So I hold the federal government directly responsible and will hold their feet to the fire to correct these things. We must re-regulate the financial industries to prevent this unregulated gambling on derivatives, and we must reduce the deficit so that we can get the United States out of debt, so that the money will be available to you to spend to make your life better.
Mr. George, you can go first on this next question. Possible solutions for solving energy problems and reducing costs appear to be offshore drilling or nuclear power, but those solutions may not really have any impact for possibly 5 years. What energy solutions would you bring forward in the short term?
Well, in the long term, I'm not sure that drilling will ever be the answer. I don't necessarily have a problem with nuclear power. When we talk about long-term solutions, also investing in wind and solar and geothermal and some of the alternative, truly clean energy sources out there are important. But in the short term, we need to make sure that we bring back a shared sense of responsibility, that we can all contribute to the energy crisis. We need to make sure that we're all doing what we can to conserve, and that the federal government is promoting this. We need to make sure that we have higher CAFE standards than what we have now. There are a lot of ways that we can save energy in the short term that we're not doing now, and I think a big problem that we have is within the federal government that we currently have, everybody is looking towards these high-powered big business solutions when there's a lot that we can be doing ourselves.
In the short term, I believe our best investment would be in conservation and in wind. You know, here in Cape Coral we have typically 2-lot sites 80 feet wide for homes, and many times there's homes right next door to each other. Perhaps City Council could consider an amendment to its building codes that would allow neighbors to get together and erect a wind turbine between their homes. Maybe you would even permit them to have beautiful, colorful sails stretched between the peaks of the roofs that would collect more wind and turn those turbines even faster to provide energy for the homes. Conservation and wind, I think, are the best short-term answers we have. I'll be glad to discuss long-term answers to the energy problem when that question arises.
Thank you. That is obviously a very good question. I had the pleasure of writing the energy policy for the state of Florida that the governor signed just a few months ago. We have a great energy policy for the state to make our buildings more energy efficient, to make sure that we're driving vehicles that are more energy efficient, but most importantly, to make sure that our utility companies are diversifying their portfolio of available energy sources, more wind, more solar, more biomass, more nuclear. There is no silver bullet solution to our energy problems. It's going to take years for us to get away from our dependence on expensive foreign oil, but we have to start the process now. I find it very discouraging that Congress knows who's using steroids in Major League Baseball, but we don't have a national energy policy. One of the first things I will do as your next congressman is move towards a national energy policy that requires energy diversification. Again, more wind, more solar, more biomass, more nuclear, and that also includes more drilling offshore, as long as it's 100 miles from our shore, to make sure that we're getting away from our dependence on expensive foreign oil.
Mr. Neal, you can answer this third question first. The unemployment rate is high. It's over 9% in Lee County. What can be done to stimulate the job market?
I think we need to retool some of our workers in Cape Coral and in the 14th Congressional District so they will have other skills other than those they maybe traditionally have learned and worked in the construction industry or in the service industry. If we will invest in education and teach people new skills that will make them more competitive in this world's economy, not only will the economy in Cape Coral improve, but the economy in the 14th Congressional District, the state of Florida, and the United States of America. Education is the key to creating new jobs.
Senator Saunders.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of serving as the Senate appointee to Enterprise Florida for the last 6 years. That's the public-private partnership that is designed to diversify and grow Florida's economy. We've had great success in bringing Torrey Pines, the Max Planck Institute, Scripps over to the east coast of Florida. These large research and pharmaceutical companies will generate tens of thousands of high-wage, high-paying jobs across the state. In the energy bill that we were talking about just a moment ago, we're incentivizing bringing these new green technologies right here to Florida, again, to diversify our economy. I would work with our partners at the local level, the county commissions, the city councils, to help bring these high-wage, high-paying jobs right here to Florida. We have the infrastructure in Southwest Florida to support that. We have the educational facilities, we have the transportation facilities, we have the quality of life. We need to go after those high-paying, high-wage jobs, and I'm quite confident with the work of the county commissions and city councils, together with Congress, we can accomplish that here for Southwest Florida.
On the federal level, there's a number of things we can do. Certainly creating incentives for high-tech industry, particularly environmentally friendly technologies like solar power is something that we could do here. We could also, on the federal level, we need to spend more on investing in infrastructure in the area, the roads, the highways. We need to do more to investing in education. But again, when we're talking about what Washington can do, there's a couple of things that seem sort of long-term, but they can have an immediate effect. The first thing that we need to do is we need to clean up America's image overseas and improve our international standing. That'll go a long way towards jump-starting the tourism industry here. Secondly, we need to make sure that all of these programs that we're talking about doing, if we're talking about increasing education, if we're talking about improving infrastructure, that there is sufficient revenue in the government to actually take care of this.
Thank you. Now you have the opportunity to ask each other a question. The person answering the question has a minute to answer. The person who asks the question has 30 seconds to rebuttal. Mr. George, you have a question for either of your opponents.
Yes, my question is for Senator Saunders. You're running with no party affiliation. You're a lifelong Republican, and you're running against our incumbent, Representative Mack. I have it's sort of a two-part question for you. The first part is, as a Republican, what specific issues do you think really differentiate you from Congressman Mack, aside from the fact that you're here and he's not? And the second part to that question
we can take it one part at a time because I've got a short memory.
Okay.
I may forget I am a Republican. I have put in my literature that I will caucus with the Republicans. I believe in those Republican principles that made the Republican Party great. I'm concerned that the Republican Party, as well as the Democratic Party in Washington, has lost their way. And my message is that once the elections are over, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans must work together. You expect that of your elected officials, and I intend to do that. And so I will caucus with the Republicans. The distinctions between the incumbent and myself, I think, are apparent, and we'll get to the second part of your question, so I'll have time to address those differences.
I think you just answered the second part of my question, but didn't quite answer the first part, so.
Did you have a rebuttal, or are you going to leave it at
I'm sorry, do I get a 30-second rebuttal? Is that the way that works, or does he?
He was supposed to get the,
Okay.
get the rebuttal.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to look at as voters in this district is we need to make sure that we have a truly independent voice that's up there that's representing us. And the question that I have for both of my opponents up here on the stage tonight is, how do you get away from this corrupt system of campaign financing that has basically defined the Republican-Democratic dichotomy? And I think until we do that, until we have a truly independent voice who's keeping an eye on both parties, we're not going to have the kind of success that we need from the federal government.
Mr. Saunders, did you have a question for either of your opponents?
I'd like to ask Mr. Neal a question. It was reported in the news press this weekend by Betty Parker that there is a fairly colorful domestic relations court case involving you and your former wife. And I want to know how you can expect to represent the citizens of Southwest Florida in the United States Congress when, in fact, at one point you were 6 years in arrears in your own child support, and in which case the court ruled that you could no longer see your child because of some potential danger to your wife and to the child. I mention that because I don't know how you can go to Washington, D.C. And say that you're going to clean up Washington when you have that type of a 10-year court case in which you spent several days or several months in jail for criminal contempt. And I think the voters need an explanation of that.
I will be pleased to respond. I don't think all the facts are correct. Yes, I had an ugly dissolution of marriage in the early 1990s. Yes, the judge and I didn't see eye to eye. Yes, I was disrespectful to the judge. Yes, the judge threw me in jail for 59 days. I did get 5 days of good time though, so I only did 54 days. But I wanted to see my son. He was a child and I wanted to spend time with him, and the judge was not enforcing his order. All this happened in the early 90s before my first run for office in 1996. My opponent, John McDougal, Sheriff of Lee County, knew all about it. He was right there in the middle of it. He knew all about it and didn't think it was an issue, so he never brought it up. Apparently, this is my October surprise. I have to deal with it because it came up in October of 2008. I must be going to win this race. Otherwise, it would have never come up. You can vote for me with confidence.
Senator Saunders, did you have a rebuttal?
No, I just felt that the citizens of Cape Coral deserve an explanation, and I think Mr. Neal has provided that.
Mr. Neal, did you have a question for either of your opponents?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the exercise portion of our program. If you'd each pick up your paddles. As with the sheriff's race, we have 10 questions for you. They're specific to Florida. Should Florida look at privatization of Alligator Alley tolls? Are you in favor of more toll roads in the state to help fund future projects? Representative Gary Aubuchon has proposed a new payment system for those that place their logos like hotels, restaurants, and gas stations on blue signs off major state highways. Are you in favor of something like this for the state or for other highways around the country?
I'm sorry, the question.
Okay. State Representative Gary Aubuchon has proposed a new payment system for those that place their logos like hotels, restaurants, and gas stations on the blue signs that you see off of major highways. Are you in favor of something like this for the state or for the rest of the country?
Thank you.
As Florida's efforts to control property insurance costs worked, would you be in favor of working with local officials to attract industry to Cape Coral? Is Governor Charlie Crist doing an effective job? Moment of doubt there. Are you in favor of a high-speed rail system for Florida? Are you in favor of the U.S. Sugar Corp purchase? Are water releases from Lake Okeechobee harming estuaries here and along the Clusachy River? Last question. Is a second stimulus check to U.S. citizens an effective way to help the economy? Thank you. We want to thank our congressional candidates. They'll be back up on the stage after we're done the commission answering questions from you and for closing statements. So thank you again. I will turn the last race over to Valerie Herring.